Now, I've already submitted my waiver wire claims, and there are a few interesting names this week, but to be honest with you, there's a lot of junk. There are a lot of these bum wide receivers that your league mates are going to be going after that we should honestly be laughing at. I'll talk about them. I'll try to make sure that you don't pick them up, but let's go position by position here, and we'll obviously cover the guys that are actually interesting. Now, quarterback is actually going to be a very important position this week on the waiver wire because we have the Joe Burrow injury, the Jaden Daniels injury, the Justin Fields injury, the JJ McCarthy injury. So typically there's not a rush to grab QBs, but there's actually going to be a pretty high demand for the position this week. And Daniel Jones is available in the majority of your fantasy leagues. And Daniel Jones looks like he is going to be a must roster quarterback going into the future because obviously the Indianapolis Colts and Jones himself, they've been great this year. The Indianapolis Colts are 2-0 for the first time since like 2009. I think the stat I heard was they scored on the first 10 possessions of the season, which is the first time any NFL offense has ever done that in NFL history. Like, they have been incredible. And on top of this, the added bonus that you're getting with Daniel Jones is going to be the rushing upside. You've had 3 rushing touchdowns in the first 2 weeks for Daniel Jones so far this year. So Daniel Jones should be the quarterback 1 pickup in the vast majority of your leagues. Now, my league specifically, Jared Goff's out there on the waiver wire. Dak Prescott's out there on the waiver wire. And the reason for that is most people are only rostering 1 QB. So I, of course, want to make sure that you know that you should be adjusting this to your exact league with your exact league settings. The easiest way to do that is going to be just going through and linking your league with flockfantasy.com. Then when you're on the My Teams page, if you look in the far right column, you can actually see the best waiver wire options. And if you go ahead and just click on that column header, it will filter by positions and it will help you identify the best players available in your specific league. I'll leave the link to flockfantasy.com in the description comment section. And again, completely free tool. You can link your sleeper, ESPN, and Yahoo leagues with the site. Now, moving over to running back, I understand that Ramondre Stevenson is going to be rostered in the majority of your leagues. He's rostered in about 60% of leagues at the moment. But if you're in that 10-team shallower format, Ramondre is probably a running back that's sitting out there. You've had back-to-back weeks for Ramondre Stevenson where he's come through with 65% of the snaps. This New England Patriots offense looks really good at this point, with Drake May taking a massive leap forward in year 2. And with Ramondre Stevenson, he actually led the New England Patriots in receiving this past week with 88 receiving yards. Now, of course, with that being said, I'm not super excited to go out there and tell you have to start Ramondre Stevenson this next week. Reality of the situation is you're probably looking at just a premium handcuff back, where if Trevion Henderson were to go down with an injury, then at that point we can call Ramondre Stevenson a must-start player. Now, going over and looking at what we have with Baishal Tootin, he was our number 1 running back in our waiver wire video last week, and it was interesting to see that he's still rostered in like 45% of leagues. I figured this number would be way up at like 80%. I mean, hell, in the Flock League, if y'all saw that video, Danny Ladd from Fantasy Stock Exchange went out there and he spent like 93% of his fab budget to go ahead and pick up Baishal Tootin, which I completely understand why. This is a phenomenal running back prospect, elite athletic profile, had the receiving skill set in college, and frankly, does have the size where if anything were to occur to Travis Etienne, he would presumably turn into the 3-down running back here in Jacksonville. Now, with that being said, do I think Baishal Tootin's going to be startable after this week where he has the receiving touchdown? No. But still, I want to reiterate what we said a week ago, that he's now in the list of premium handcuff backs, somebody that's probably like a tier ahead of Tyler Algier, where we'll talk about Tyler Algier in 1 second. But the difference between like Tyler Algier and Tootin is there's no world in which you ever have Tyler Algier actually leapfrogging Bijan Robinson on the roster and being startable with Bijan available, whereas Tootin, I hope it doesn't happen. I have Travis Etienne on my own fantasy team. There is an outside chance that Tootin actually does become the starter in Jacksonville. Fingers crossed it doesn't happen, though. Now, I do need to talk about Tyler Algier. Algier, great week this past week. He's actually had 26 carries through the first 2 weeks already, and he had a target for a total of 17 opportunities this past week. He gets the rushing touchdown, 15 fantasy points. This is just a reminder that Tyler Algier would be an automatic must-start running back in the absence of Bijan Robinson, but clearly you would never go through and you would never start Algier if Bijan's healthy. Very similar to Blake Corum. We actually saw Blake Corum get usage inside the red zone for the Los Angeles Rams this past week. Blake Corum, great running back at Michigan, has the size to be a 3-down player. The limitation with his profile, however, is even if you were to get an injury to Kyren Williams, you probably have Jarquez Hunter actually as the receiving back in that scenario, where Blake Corum would be operating on first and second down, very similar to what you just have with Kyren Williams right now, right? And we see Kyren Williams be a running back one in fantasy with that role. I don't necessarily think Blake Corum's as talented. So if we were to get an injury to Kyren, I would say at that point, Blake Corum probably slides in as a running back 2 in my weekly rankings, but definitely somebody that you would be interested to start. Now, as we move on, I definitely want to just quick side note, if Jordan Mason's out there, Jordan Mason would be the top player to pick up. With the Aaron Jones injury, he's going to be an auto start almost regardless of format, but Jordan Mason rostered in the vast majority of your leagues. Now let's go over to wide receiver. Wide receiver is a position where a lot of people get suckered in. They're going to go out there and they're going to pick up, I hate to say his name, they're going to pick up Cedric Tillman. They're going to put Tillman in their starting lineup this next week, and he's not going to do anything. Like, those wide receivers, very interesting in best ball, where yes, when they have the random big play, they slide into your starting lineup, but you don't necessarily have to rely upon them in terms of projecting them when they're going to have the big week. There is one wide receiver name that's very interesting though, and that's going to be Troy Franklin. Troy Franklin actually was really good in week 1, where with only 59% of the snaps against the Tennessee Titans, he actually had 44 receiving yards. He had 6 targets as well. And what we saw from Franklin in week 2 is the expanded role. And this is what's so exciting. He jumps up with 83% of the snaps played. He has 9 targets in this game, 8 receptions, 89 receiving yards, and the receiving touchdown. And if you go back to when he was coming into the NFL draft last season, this was a wide receiver that a lot of people in the dynasty community, including myself, we were all very excited about. The actual production profile that he had in school was great. He broke out at an early age. He dominated his final year in college. And a lot of people, including myself, thought he was going to be either a 2nd or a 3rd round NFL draft pick. Now, he did fall down to being selected on day 3, which obviously was very frustrating, and that limited his overall playing time as a rookie. But it's looking like the cream is rising to the top in Denver. And I do believe that Troy Franklin actually has it in the range of outcomes to turn into an every week starter for you. Now, going over and looking at Romeo Doubs, he is a trap. Okay. I understand. Yes, he scores a touchdown. I understand. Yes, Jayden Reed is now injured. The Jayden Reed injury has almost no impact on Doubs. He went from 71% of the snaps to 74% of the snaps in week 2. He went from 4 targets to 5 targets. He went from 2 receptions to 3 receptions. The only reason people are interested is he scored the receiving touchdown. This is an offense that's going to spread the ball out a ton. We have seen Romeo Doubs for a large section of games be mainly unusable in fantasy, regardless of if Jayden Reed is there or not. There will be some of these random weeks where Doubs scores a touchdown and he would be a top 24 wide receiver in fantasy, but it's almost going to be impossible to predict when that happens. Going over to Wan'Dale Robinson. Wan'Dale is also a trap for the same reason. I drafted him in a lot of underdog best ball drafts. I'd love to see the 142 receiving yards and the receiving touchdown this past week. But do we really expect Russell Wilson to have 450 passing yards next week? No. So in what world do you ever put Wan'Dale Robinson inside your starting lineup unless you get an injury to Malik Neighbor? It's probably not happening, right? It's going to be a boom bust option. It's going to be very difficult to be excited about. The one guy that I think maybe has that high ceiling is going to be Alec Ayomanor. The reason for this is he's a day 3 rookie that's getting on the field immediately, earning the same amount of targets as Calvin Ridley and doing more with his targets than Calvin Ridley is. Ayomanor actually has a receiving touchdown, 6 targets, has both the highlight grab in the end zone as well as on the sideline. And he is that rookie growing alongside Cam Ward. So if this offense continues to get better, I think I would actually prefer him over both Romeo Doubs and Wan'Dale Robinson. And then the last wide receiver that I think your league mates are going to be looking at that, in my opinion, you'd be crazy to pick up would be Hunter Renfrow. Let's be on the same page here. Hunter Renfrow is in one of the worst offenses in the NFL. Not only is Hunter Renfrow in one of the worst offenses in the NFL, but at the same time, you're in a situation in which he was cut before the season started. Yes, The team thought Hunter Renfrow was so good that they cut him, then went, oh crap, we got to put Jalen Coker on the IR. Let's pick him back up, throw him in the slot. Once Jalen Coker comes back, Hunter Renfrow is going to be nothing. So you played through this. Are you putting Hunter Renfrow in your week 3 starting lineup? Nope, you're not. If he has a decent game in week 3, are you putting him in your week 4? So no, you're not. There are no bye weeks in week 4. You would have to either be a crazy person, have a garbage team, or playing in an extremely deep format. So really the only wide receivers I'd be interested in, definitely Troy Franklin for sure. And then Elike Manor, I think, is interesting as well. Now going over and looking at what we have with the tight ends. The streaming tight ends are just as good, if not better, than whatever the hell I drafted with TJ Hawkinson. Like, realistically, if Zach Ertz was on the waiver wire, I would be scrambling to pick him up. I know Ertz is probably not on waivers in the majority of your leagues at this point, but back-to-back games with a receiving touchdown, even with the Jaden Daniels injury, I would way rather play someone like Zach Ertz over TJ Hawkinson this week. Harold Fannin also is going to be a very interesting name. Now, I did not want to start him against the Baltimore Ravens because the Cleveland Browns projected to be the worst offense in the league. And honestly, I probably won't want to start him against the Green Bay Packers because yet again this week, the Cleveland Browns are going to project to be the worst offense in the NFL. It's a brutal matchup. But what's very interesting with Harold Fannin is now this is back-to-back weeks where he's getting usage almost as a slot wide receiver. And obviously, that's going to be something that you kind of need to see considering the fact that David Njoku is going to be used more so as the traditional inline blocking tight end. So the usage continues to be good with Harold Fannin. Back-to-back games with over 9 fantasy points from a rookie tight end is extremely encouraging, especially considering the fact that, you didn't have a receiving touchdown either week. Now, Juwan Johnson will be the last name that I bring up. I am actually going to be putting in my waiver bids right after this video. I had to do this video to get that research done. But if Juwan Johnson's out there, I'm definitely picking him up and dropping TJ Hawkinson. With Juwan, he's had an average of 10 targets over the past 2 weeks. In week 2, he comes through with a big-time receiving touchdown, which obviously is exciting, but to get the 9 targets after the 11-target performance week 1, it is just really encouraging to see this type of usage while the Saints have no Taysom Hill. And then going over to the DST streamers, the number 1 defense this week is going to be the Green Bay Packers. I personally am going to be putting a bid on the Packers in the Flock League. Thomas is editing this video. I'm not going to tell you how much I'm bidding. I don't want him to know that. But I will be putting a bid for the Green Bay Packers. It's going to be more than $1. I'll say that as well. The Seattle Seahawks will be the second best DST streamer. You have obviously the number 1 thing that I do every single week to figure out these defensive streamers is just going through and looking at sportsbook projections. They are projecting the Browns to be the lowest scoring offense in the league. They're projecting the Saints to be the second lowest scoring offense in the league this week. So with Cleveland and with New Orleans, obviously we're going to be targeting their opponents for those defenses, which are the Packers and Seahawks, which both are great defenses and have great matchups. The Buffalo Bills will probably be in my number 1 ranked defense this week. They're going up against the Miami Dolphins, and there is a 12.5 point spread on this game. Now, the issue that I'm going to have in terms of going through and picking up the Bills, as they're already rostered in my league. The Bucs would be very interesting going up against the Jets as well, honestly, kind of regardless of if Justin Fields is going to play or not. The Chiefs, very interesting going up against the Giants. Then you have the Vikings against the Bengals with no Burrow. Then you have the Atlanta Falcons against the Carolina Panthers with the decimated offensive line. And you have the Indianapolis Colts going up against the Tennessee Titans as well. But I think that's it for this waiver wire video. I'm very interested to see what happens with the Flock League waivers. And again, I'm not going super aggressive after anybody this week. I think you let your league mates blow their fab. I think you let your league mates waste roster spots on a lot of these bum wide receivers. Really the only names that I'm super interested in. On quarterback, Daniel Jones, if you need them. Running back, Stevenson, Tootin are absolute must roster players. Troy Franklin, Elike Manor at this point, I think are worth roster spots. And then those streaming tight ends we discussed are probably a lot better than the actual tight end that you drafted. But I really appreciate you. Hope I was able to help you out and hope we get to see you out in the live stream later tonight. Of course, we'll be answering all your fantasy football questions. Just make sure you go down there and subscribe and drop a like on this video.